Hi everybody, welcome to 2022 and the start of me reading my trilogy to you, but in segments, not in its entirety. Nobody has enough coffee for me to do that. But I will start by reading, which is my book by author Patrick Lorcan-Woods, Madame Part 1, Bittersweet Goodbyes. And coming this summer will be the revamped version of my trilogy. So I'm looking forward to launching it officially again in summer. And until then, I'm going to give you segments. Somebody said, go on YouTube, read little segments, and you'll gain a following before the launch. So that's exactly what I'm doing. I have a music channel. Please check out my music channel in the link below the description. I'll also give you a description of what the book is about. The story is about a Protestant woman who is the last of her bloodline living in a remote part of Ireland. She is jilted on her wedding day by the one true love of her life and falls into depression as a result. During this difficult period, she also suffers from the loss of both her parents. Father Peter appears and offers to take control of her estate, Linden Hall. He promises to bring it back to its former glory, but in return she has a heavy price to pay. Father Peter insists that she must rear 5 small boys in secret. Why have these children been sent to her? Why have they to be imprisoned at Linden Hall? And will Madame keep her side of the bargain? What are the repercussions if she's not? That is what the whole of the book, Madame Bittersweet Goodbyes, is all about. But I will read you the preface part, just for the first video. As you look down on the suburb of Dublin, you see an historic city full of fine architecture and buildings. The area I lived in was different. The buildings had only one thing in common: poverty and strife. Initially, I lived in the inner city in a place called Mountjoy Square. It had a dark side to it, a secret that would eventually rock the foundations of the Catholic Church like none before. The area I was born into consisted of many tenement slum buildings, surrounded by small streets. All were dark and grey in colour, and most of the families lived in small cramped conditions, with as many as 9 people sharing a small place they called home. Times were hard in 1945, and many people either had immigrated to England after the war or had gone up to the north of Ireland to search for work in the shipyards in Belfast. There was no guarantee of work in Dublin at the time, and I remember people having to queue from early morning to late at night at the Dockland areas in Dublin, hoping for casual work of any sort, even unloading ships. The incoming vessels always needed people. It was the first come, first served basis. Most of the homes in Dublin these days are torn rags which they used as curtains to keep the natural daylight out and the outside world from looking in. However, I suppose anyone would do the same if everything around him or her was so bleak that the whole world seemed like one big black hole. Here your daily routine centered on coping with the poverty and strife that each day brought. You would sell your soul, your body, even sell your children if you had to, just to bring money home. I remember it was normal for many of my friends just to have stewed potatoes and water as their main diet. Nevertheless, the one thing that kept most of the neighbourhoods banded together was the gossip, which all the female homemakers became involved with at some stage. At the tender age of 5, I had to grow up and learn certain social skills in order to survive. My mother worked all day in the local convent as a cleaner. It was a good job. She paid was very little, but it had enough to feed and clothe as well. She ate at work, which was a great way to ease the stress of surviving, because in those days, all we could do was survive. I remember very little about my mother, other than the fact that she came home, exhausted, went to bed early, and then rose at dawn to return to work. In the mornings I would have a hearty breakfast whilst my mother watched and smiled. She always made sure lunch was prepared, consisting of bread and a bit of soup, along with an apple, taken from the convent. She swore to me secrecy about this and told me how lucky we were. Every time she left the house, I cried, as the day on my own was long and dangerous one. There was no one around to protect me if things went wrong. However, I became a great observer and listened to all of the neighbours' gossip. Each evening, as I took my mother's shoes off and washed her feet, I'd recite the gossip in detail to her. She in turn would try to listen, but usually fell asleep. I'd cover her up and sit sleepishly, wishing things could be different. I overcame my initial loneliness as a child by studying the neighbours with just an overactive mind to keep me company. Take, for example, the McCormicks at number 10 Mountjoy Square. There was Mrs. McCormick, her other half, and their 10 children. They had an even number of boys and girls. Aye, but I always wanted twins, was her famous saying. For 10 years running, it seemed she had a permanent place in the local hospital. The nurses were aghast at the sheer physical energy of the woman, having so many babies year after year after year. At the time, the men would clink their glasses to Mr. McCormick down at the local pub, celebrating what had become an annual event. The women used to nudge each other, and as he walked by them in total disbelief that such a frail character could be so virile, everybody loved them, as they were a wholesome couple that gave generously to those in need of help whenever they could. Turning back at Barrack Street towards home was the Slattery's home. There were a family of 4 girls and 1 boy who terrorised the neighbourhood for as long as I could remember. The girls were a complete nightmare. Their names were Anne, Marie, Catherine, and of course not forgetting Brenda. Brenda was a man-eater, my mother used to say. It was rumoured that she had 3 children, all fathered by different men. Eventually she had all of these children adopted. This came about because she had been, according to the locals, a lady of the night. When I inquired of my mother what that meant, she slapped me so hard I never dared ask again. Brenda had a rough and ready attitude towards everything, which convinced me that she was a part animal and part human. My mother said she had a mouth on her like a sewer rat. Her ritual was to terrorise the kids in the neighbourhood into giving her money. She did not care where it came from. All her victims usually only had 1 week to produce the goods. She had a system. Each day, one of the victims had to give her something. This became a ritual, allowing her the luxury of buying herself tights and other luxury items on a daily basis. It was a rarity to have brass buttons on dresses, but Brenda had them. Some of the neighbours mocked. "She isn't this the only thing that holds it together," says one. Others said, "It makes her more respectable for the night shift," wink wink. Their mother was an alcoholic. Their father never worked a day in his life. The only boy in the family was Robert, and he had a great respect for my mother. He always ensured that his sister Brenda never harmed me. He was the only male figure in my life at the time. He mystified and intrigued me. His finely tuned body sent my mother into a tizzy whenever she hugged him. They were just friends, but yet she always sent me on an errand when he called. I never quite understood this. When the other children in my street and I needed some fun, we'd go to O'Connell Street. There we would play bang bang. The older children would steal whatever they could from local stores and businesses and walk around acting all grown up, smoking cigarettes. My friends and I would amuse ourselves by making slings and firing small stones at the business people's hats. They were easy targets if they wore our favourites, and those were worn by the Protestant businessmen of the city. They were called bowler type of hats. If you knocked one sideways, you were called half-brain for the rest of the day. But if you knocked one completely off the person's head, you were known as the cool one until you arrived home. We also used to love getting old wheels and making wooden carts, which took us up and down the hills. To us poor children, it was the nearest thing we'd get to a rocket-fueled spaceship to send us to the moon. We had great imaginations in those days. Unfortunately, this is all I can remember vividly of my old childhood I once had. Most of the other events in my young life at the time are blurred. I do remember one morning my mother being in the kitchen after I came back from playing with the other kids on the street. She came over and stroked my face. Next she asked me to sit up and eat all my food. I then asked her why she was crying. She told me that times were hard and that God had now put another baby in her tummy. Therefore, I was to have a new brother or sister someday. In life, there is good and there is bad, she told me, and explained in this case, I was the good and the new baby was the bad, as she could not afford to feed us both. She explained that she had spoken to the parish priest about this, and that he would be looking after me when the new baby arrived. In the meantime, she said, we had to become the best of friends and make each day special until the new parish priest came to bring me to my new home. I was to live in a big house and go to school with some other children. It'll be okay, she said tearfully, and promised to visit me and keep an eye on me each week. Sure, I was only 4 years of age, so the news was confusing for me. I just played the classic child's game, pretend, letting on I understood, when really I did not. As the year went by, my mother's pregnancy became more and more noticeable. She suffered constantly with fatigue. She informed me that when mummies have babies, the nuns come and look after them. She told me she was not sure yet if I was to be sent to my new home first, or I would join other children in a place called the workhouse beforehand. I spent many nights listening to her stating that the workhouse would be a good thing for me. I was a child. Sure, what did I know? I just listened. But at such a young age, nothing could have prepared me for having to leave my mother. When the nuns finally visited our home, they looked at me and smiled. They prepared me for my big day, as they called it, by talking about the workhouse as a special place for God's little children. This was also the first time that I recalled hearing my mother and the nuns talk about the new parish priest. His name? Father Peter. He was in charge of the workhouse. Immediately my mother cried, and then the nuns consoled her, telling her she should remain quiet to keep the personal feelings about Father Peter to herself, otherwise it would be terrible trouble. This priest had made special arrangements for me to stay at a house instead of the work home. A woman known as Madame owned this home. The conversation became more and more confusing for me. I stopped peering through the door and ran away, cursing the arrival of my new brother or sister. Crossing the road on what was technically my last day, I called over to my friend Aidan. He lived in the basement flat in Mountjoy Square itself. As I arrived and peered down at the window of his home to see if there was any sign of life, I did notice him there. His mother had Aidan and his sisters lined up on the sink unit, preparing them for their weekly wash. Everyone in the neighbourhood did this. You were either bathed in a tin can in front of a hot, blazing fire in the living room, or, depending on your size, you were bathed at the sink unit of the kitchen. Aidan's mother was hard at work, her hair falling continuously in her face. As she perspired, she grappled with Aidan's screens with suds in his eyes from the soap she was using. I called out and asked if Aidan could see me after his wash. She nodded, pointing with her head to come in. As he entered, I noticed his sisters were all perched in front of the coal fire, drying their long hair. The younger sister, who was also the cleverest, combed her hair out of sight of the others. Then, repositioning herself, she waited patiently for her mother to brush her long hair after finishing with the other siblings. The others always cried as their mother pulled the tangled knots in their hair from the roots to get the desired effect tangle-free. The youngest Ursula smiled at her mother as her mother praised her hair and said she had the best daughter anyone could want. She winked at me for not saying anything. An infuriated Aidan then came over to me to come to his room. This large Georgian-type dwelling was divided with 4 poles that separated each part of the floor space. It resembled the local hospital ward, and its way of separating patients from each other. It was effective enough, and each party had their own privacy. Sitting him down, I told him I was going to be leaving the area shortly, but I didn't know when, adding, it could be today, because my mother is having her new baby. And then I proceeded I was going to a workhouse where I thought other children lived happily, I told him. Solemnly we sat and conversed as children do, about our friendship, and promised we would always keep in touch. He hugged me and said he would visit me wherever I was going. Reassured after our pledges of friendship, we placed shadows on the wall, making many animal characters as we could. Then, when it was getting late, I headed for home. Once there, a priest called Father Peter greeted me. My mother explained that she loved me, and before I could even respond, another priest lifted me and hurled me high in the air into a waiting van. My mother ran towards me, giving me a teddy and a bag that contained a photograph and some food for the journey. But Father Peter wouldn't let me take the food. Frightened, confused, I cried, "Mummy, Mummy, please come with me." I'd now turned just 5 years of age. It was 1946, and my name was Nathan. That is the preface of my book. As you can see below, it's called Madame Part 1, Bittersweet Goodbyes, and you can understand the bittersweetness of that goodbye to his mother. And the main character is called Nathan, and he goes off to join 4 other boys. Whom are they? I shall continue the read, and you shall be introduced to them in the next part of Chapter 1. Until then, I hope you've enjoyed my first introduction to what is a trilogy of books that will be out, revamped, come summer. And I hope that you will join me in the intermittent period on YouTube, on my channel. And if you can't find me, just go to CC Pop Video Weekly. I nearly forgot my own channel. And my book link will be there as well. So either way, you'll get me. And here, I also put in the description the link to my Pop channel. Please subscribe to my book channel if you want more. It's a new, aspiring way, I feel, of getting you all to know me, not just as a musical interpreter, but also as the author that is, that shall be, and always will be, Patrick Logan Woods. Take care for now, and I'm glad that you enjoyed the first part. Take care. Please leave a comment, like, and subscribe to my new book channel, for more is coming your way. Take care for now. Slán.